This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. The 4th year of pursuing Hailey, she finally agreed to marry me. But on our wedding day, she ran away for another man. I chased after her in my suit, and she said, "Rocky, can't you be more understanding? He's in critical condition. Right now, I have to go be with him. We can hold the wedding later." As I heard the notification sound in my ear ding, mission accomplished, I smiled brightly and let go of her hand. Since freshman year, I had been Hailey's devoted follower. How devoted, you ask? Day or night, as long as Hailey needed something, I would be there for her instantly. Bringing water, breakfast, saving her a seat, these were just the basics. I even waited in line for hours in the pouring rain just to buy her a limited edition handbag. My classmates mocked me. They said I had good looks, a wealthy background, why degrade myself like this? As if I couldn't live without Hailey. In truth, they were partly right. I really couldn't live without her. At first, Hailey coldly rejected my advances because her heart always belonged to a first love who had gone abroad. Later, maybe because I was too obedient and easy to command, she started getting used to having me around. She would occasionally invite me out when she went out with friends, though usually just to pay the bill. Her friends called me brother-in-law in front of me, but laughed behind my back, calling me a pathetic simp. Hailey knew all this, yet never stopped them. Everything changed in our sophomore year. Hailey went camping in the mountains with her friends. On the way back, their car broke down. She called me in the middle of the night. Because of the weak signal, I didn't hear everything clearly, only that she needed me to pick her up. Before dawn, I drove straight to the mountains. When I arrived, I found 5 people waiting, but I had brought a small car. Hailey thought for a moment and said, "Rocky, we're all exhausted from camping. We really don't have the energy to wait anymore. How about I drive your car and take them back first? Once we get to an area with a signal, I'll call a car to come get you." I heard the notification sound in my ear. Without hesitation, I agreed. Hailey drove away with her friends, and I alone spent a freezing night in the mountains. I was almost frozen to death until I stumbled upon another group of campers who saved me. I caught pneumonia from the cold and was hospitalized for days. When Hailey came to visit, she apologized reluctantly. She said that after leaving the mountains, she found out a friend was in trouble, and overwhelmed with sadness, went to a bar and forgot all about me. I lowered my head so she wouldn't see the expression on my face. "If no one else had come into the mountains, I could have died," I said. She clicked her tongue impatiently and scoffed. "Nothing happened, did it? Fine, I admit it was my fault. To make it up to you, I'll accept your confession. Let's be together." I never imagined my first love would begin in such a careless way. I froze and placed my fingers unconsciously, curling nails digging into my palm. A moment later, I took a deep breath and said, "Okay." Later, I found out that Hailey got drunk that night because her first love had just gotten engaged abroad. The thought of someone else being his bride drove her to drown her sorrows in alcohol. After we got together, Hailey became even more demanding. She said she couldn't stand takeout. I suggested hiring a cook for her. She frowned and said, "Rocky, is it really so hard to cook for me? It's just cooking. Can't you do it for me? Or is it that you can't let go of your spoiled rich boy pride?" And so these hands that once played piano began learning how to cook. Hailey loved fish. The first dish I learned to make was braised fish. I was a beginner, clumsy in the kitchen. Hot oil splattered onto the back of my hand, raising a painful blister. Still, I proudly placed the dish in front of her. Learning something new gave me a sense of accomplishment. I eagerly watched as Hailey took a bite. The next second, she spat it out with a frown. "Ugh, disgusting." She dropped her chopsticks and said, "Rocky, did you do this on purpose?" I read online that men deliberately do household chores badly so that women won't ask them to do it again. I thought you'd be different. But in the end, forget it, whatever. To her, I was just a pushover. I knew she was about to compare me to her first love again, but I had tried. I spent the entire day working on that meal, ruined 3 or 4 fish before finally making one edible. The smell of oil and smoke had already taken away my appetite. Seeing her look of disgust, my empty stomach twisted painfully. For some reason, I held up my blistered hand and said, "Hailey, I really didn't do it on purpose. Look, I even got burned trying." She glanced at it briefly and said, "Serves you right. Clumsy idiot, you can't do anything right." At that moment, I wanted to stand up and slap her, tell her I was done with her, but the notification sound in my ear calmed my anger. I swallowed my pride. I didn't say a word. I told myself it's fine. Just endure it a little longer. Everything will be okay. At first, I didn't resent getting close to Hailey. She wasn't a bad person. She was arrogant, but she fed stray cats. She kindly guided lost parents on campus. She politely rejected other guys who confessed to her. I couldn't understand why she treated me so terribly until one night at a gathering with her friends. I was late due to traffic. Just as I was about to push open the door to the private room, I heard someone ask, "Hailey, what's it like dating young Master Rocky? I heard you boss him around a lot, but he's still head over heels for you. Honestly, you two are a perfect match. Why not just settle down?" Hailey sneered. "Him deserve me. He's just a pathetic simp. If he weren't rich, would I even look at him? And don't ever bring up that perfect match nonsense in front of me again. I hate that kind of outdated feudal bullshit." In that moment, I understood. Hailey didn't just dislike me. She hated the idea that so social class had kept her apart from her first love, my family. Her parents praised me endlessly. She couldn't give up luxury to live a hard life with her first love, but she still wanted to chase the fantasy of pure love. From then on, I tried to distance myself from her, but I couldn't. In junior year, Hailey decided to start a business. Her family's traditional industry was declining, and she saw it as an opportunity to prove herself. Without hesitation, I gave her all my savings. But she lacked proper market research, and soon lost everything. She became depressed, as if she was finally seeing life for what it really was. That night, after her company collapsed, she drank heavily. She held me and said, "Rocky, I'm so glad you're here." I turned my face slightly, hiding my disgust. Then in a gentle voice, I asked her, "Hailey, do you love me?" She didn't answer. She just leaned in for a kiss. I smirked and stopped her. "I won't force you. I'll wait until you're ready." In 3 years together, we had never been intimate. She claimed to be conservative. I knew she was saving herself for her first love. Fine. I didn't want to touch her either. Later, her parents helped her restart her business. This time she succeeded, with her career thriving. She treated me better. That year was the best our relationship had ever been, until her first love returned, got into a car accident, and on our wedding day, she left me alone at the altar. The wedding was an outdoor ceremony designed by me. The sky was blue, the grass was green, and the scenery was perfect. Although I regretted that the person waiting to exchange vows with me was not someone else, this was my debt to Hailey. Everything here was my way of repaying it. "Ms. Hailey, do you take Mr. Rockey as your husband no matter the ups and downs in life, whether in sickness or in health? Will you always respect him, tolerate him, and never abandon him?" Hailey was about to answer when her bridesmaid suddenly rushed over and whispered a few words in her ear. Hailey's face changed drastically, and she turned around and ran out of the venue. Holding the ring, I chased after her and called out, "Hailey." Everyone present was a prominent figure in the business world, my parents, and I couldn't afford to be humiliated like this. The eldest son of the Fong family, Rockey, abandoned by the bride at his own wedding. I grabbed her hand and pleaded humbly, "Don't go, at least wait until our wedding is over. I beg you." Hailey lowered her eyes and said, "Rockey, be more understanding. Tony is in critical condition at the hospital, and I have to be there with him. His life is at stake. Isn't that more important than a meaningless wedding ceremony? I said I would marry you, and I will. We can hold a bigger, grander wedding later." After she finished speaking, I still held her hand, refusing to let go. She impatiently shook off my grip. Then she took off her wedding dress and threw it onto me. At that moment, a loud notification sounded in my ears. Ding dong. "Congratulations, host, on completing the tragic romance mission. The deal is complete. Wishing you a happy life ahead." My parents hurried over to support me, but I couldn't help but chuckle. I was free. Rocky was finally free. During the summer after graduating high school, I kept tripping while walking, so the butler took me to the hospital. After a full-body checkup, I was diagnosed with amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. This disease affects only 4 to 6 people out of every 100,000, yet it is even crueler than cancer. My parents rushed back from abroad overnight. My mother held me in her arms, comforting me with words about the best doctors overseas who would surely cure me. But behind the scenes, she sobbed uncontrollably in my father's embrace. In one hand, I held my university acceptance letter. In the other, a note from the person I liked. The image of my parents forcing smiles kept replaying in my mind, and I couldn't help but collapse onto the bed, crying my heart out. My life had just begun, yet soon I would be confined to a bed waiting for death. How could I possibly accept that? Just when I was drowning in despair, something calling itself the tragic romance system appeared before me. It said its previous host had failed the mission and died, but it needed energy to leave this world. If I agreed to bind with it temporarily and provide it with tragic romance points, it could cure my body. I wiped my tears and asked calmly, "Why should I believe you?" It replied, "Tomorrow's medical report will prove everything." And it did. The next day, all my test results returned to normal. The doctors were baffled and scheduled regular follow-ups. "Why did you choose me?" I asked, puzzled. It answered, "Because your physical and emotional metrics closely match my previous hosts, which minimizes my energy loss when rebinding." What about the target of the romance mission? I held on to a shred of hope, uncertain. But the system's answer shattered my fantasy. "I will select the person whose data is closest to the original target." Does she need to fall in love with me? No, you're only a temporary host. As long as you love her and she tortures you emotionally and physically, once the tragic romance points reach 100, the system will automatically unbind. "So your real name is the simp system, huh?" All I got in response was the sound of crackling static. I agreed to bind with the system. After it went dormant inside me, I had no more physical issues that summer. The doctors suspected a misdiagnosis, but I knew the truth. I could go to university as planned, and my parents finally smiled again. Except for that piece of paper buried in my drawer, never seeing the light of day. I couldn't tell anyone about the system. And since I didn't know how long it would take to regain my freedom, why drag her into it? From the day I met Hailey Hailey as a freshman when the system assigned me to pursue her to today when she fled from our wedding. It had been 4 years. It was finally over. I stood up and walked to the center of the venue, unable to hide the smile on my face. The guests whispered among themselves, thinking I had lost my mind from anger. Taking the microphone, I said, "I sincerely thank all of you for attending my wedding today, but unfortunately, there's been an unexpected incident. Now I just want to say there are countless reasons for two people to be together, but often it only takes one reason to let go. Hailey and I were fated to meet, but not to be together. Since that's the case, let's end this ill-fated bond completely. I ask all the elders present to bear witness from today on Rockey and Hailey are officially and utterly done. We will have nothing to do with each other ever again." After speaking, I bowed and left the stage. Hailey's parents anxiously blocked my way. "Xiaofeng, don't say things in anger. Hailey is just being impulsive. If you make such a big scene now, how will you two ever have another wedding?" I had spent so long chasing Hailey that everyone around her believed I couldn't live without her. Even her parents forgot she was the one marrying up. Smiling slightly, I said, "Aunt Alice, there won't be another wedding." "Excuse me." Her parents still wanted to argue, but my parents had the security guards block them. On the way home, I felt lighter than ever before. My mother glanced at me and asked, "You've made up your mind?" I gave a quiet my eyes slightly wet. When I first pursued Hailey, my parents thought I was just a passionate young man experiencing his first love. Later, after I had debased myself for her time and time again, they realized something was wrong. They even suspected I had been cursed. For a time, they forcibly separated me from Hailey. But no matter how they tried to persuade me, I remained silent. Left with no choice, they reluctantly accepted our relationship. That unknowingly gave Hailey more leverage over me. Late at night, it still felt surreal. Was it really over? I no longer had to keep my phone on 24/7 for her. I no longer had to force a smile while enduring her unreasonable demands. I sat up in bed and pulled out the note I had kept in my drawer for 4 years. The paper had slightly yellowed with time. It contained only one sentence. "Okay, let's go watch the sunrise." I guess the sunrise I missed at 18 would never shine on 22-year-old Rockey again. When Hailey came to find me, my family was happily having breakfast together. As soon as the butler announced her arrival, the atmosphere at the table shifted. My parents were cautiously watching me. Feeling a pang in my heart, I immediately said, "Kick her out. If she refuses to leave, pour slop on her." The butler looked troubled. "Young master, we don't have slop at home." My dad coughed twice, then chuckled. "Aren't we fertilizing the garden recently? Use that, mix it with some water." Hailey was doused for 3 days straight, yet she still clung to my doorstep, refusing to leave. I figured I still had some resentment left to vent, so I let the butler bring her in. In the garden, I sat leisurely under a sunshade sipping orange juice. Hailey stood under the scorching sun, her makeup smudged, frowning at me. "Rockey, what's wrong with you? How dare you treat me like this? I already texted you an apology. What more do you want? It was just a wedding. If you keep this up, I really won't marry you." Looking at her disheveled state, I suddenly laughed. "Hailey, did you really think I wanted to marry you? We never even registered our marriage. Sure, you're pretty and your family has some money, but the things you pride yourself on, I've never lacked them, and I have even more." Before I even finished speaking, Hailey's eyes widened as if she no longer recognized me. And honestly, that was true. At gatherings, if she asked me to play the piano, I played. If she wanted me to foot the bill, I paid. I never had a temper. Now in her eyes, this must be what they call a loyal dog biting back. At the beginning of my strategy, my heartbreak points increased too slowly. Afraid that I would waste my entire life, I kept trying to fall in love with Hailey. I paid attention to her interests and tried to understand her thoughts. But the more I understood, the more I detested her. That subtle arrogance, the unintentional emotional manipulation, the fake courtesy masking her disdain. And with another person always lingering in my heart, I couldn't help but compare. I realized I could never love Hailey. I wanted to give up, even if my remaining life was short. Then something changed. The system detected my suffering from being forced to pursue Hailey. The deeper my disgust for her grew, the more the system recognized it as heartbreak points. From then on, the more pain I felt, the more I despised Hailey, the higher my heartbreak points soared. Until at the wedding, they reached their peak. Love flourishes only in freedom. Any forced nurturing only leads to its demise. Just one sentence, "You should love this person," is enough to make you hate them. That was true for me, and for Hailey as well. Snapping back to reality, I stood up and walked to Hailey, looking at her as I spoke. "I never loved you. Someone like you who doesn't even know how to respect others. What is there for me to love? You're clinging to me now only because your parents are forcing you and because of your wounded pride." Hailey's face turned pale. She sneered. "I admit leaving you at the wedding was wrong, but everything before that, you wanted it. I never forced you. You were the one who chased after me, and now you're blaming me. Also, stop bringing my parents into this." I looked her straight in the eye. "I admit I pursued you for a reason, but I never treated you badly. You were the one who never cherished it. You kept me around while stringing along others. I could let all of that go, Hailey. You're free now, so don't come looking for me again." Hailey never showed up again. She had her pride. All cruelty cruelty and wrongdoing come wrapped in a veneer of politeness. Like the time she deliberately gave someone the wrong directions. Like how she turned admirers into bragging material behind their backs. I started gradually taking over the family business, first stepping into the medical industry. This company had been registered 4 years ago. Even though my follow-up test results remained normal, my parents were still scared. Assistant Fong, this is Dr. Serena, an expert in ALS research. She recently joined our company. If you don't mind, you can follow her to learn. I had planned to start from the assistant level, but I never expected to see Serena like this. She listened to the HR introduction without any expression, adjusted her glasses, and greeted me coldly. Rocky, long time no see. A long time no see. I stammered. It felt like I was back in those high school afternoons. She was still the aloof top student, and I was still the rebellious rich kid. In high school, I was arrogant, never taking my studies seriously. But my deskmate was different. She was a year younger, having skipped a grade. She was always focused in class, a famous top student. Seeing her cold, bespectacled face, I couldn't help but tease her. And she would always respond seriously. Rocky, please pay attention. Otherwise, you'll be last place again next exam. Later, I found out she loved those tiny candies wrapped in colorful foil. So I bought her a whole jar. Her eyes lit up, glancing between the candies and me. I think that expression is something I'll never forget. Over time, maybe it was her dedication that moved me. I started studying too. Even though I could have just hired tutors, I insisted on having her teach me. She would patiently explain problems one step at a time, then ask, "Do you understand now?" If I said yes, she would praise me. Things like, "Rocky, you're really smart," or "Rocky, you've improved a lot," like she was coaxing a child, and I fell for it every time. Only I knew. Serena, the genius who represented our school in provincial competitions, was actually a little nerd who forgot to eat when she got lost in books. Later, I discovered she cherished every book she owned, even textbooks. She could eat her mom's fish for 3 days straight without complaint. She always read science magazines, dreaming of becoming a scientist. She once said girls can be scientists too. I think I had a bit of a crush on her. The day before the college entrance exam, I watched her work on a problem and softly asked, "Serena, after exams, can we go watch the sunrise together?" Her pen paused, lashes trembling slightly, but she didn't reply. When I got home, I found a note tucked in my book, but unfortunately, in the end, I stood her up. Seeing Serena again, I realized how much she had changed. The once old-fashioned black-framed glasses had been replaced with delicate gold-rimmed ones. Her short hair, which used to be ridiculed as ugly, had grown long. She had also shot up in height from 155 centimeters to 170 centimeters, now exuding the aura of an untouchable goddess. She didn't ask why I had failed to show up back then, nor did she display any excitement or warmth at meeting an old classmate. After addressing me by name once, she switched to calling me Assistant Fong for the rest of our conversation. "You wanted to be a scientist, so why did you end up studying medicine?" I couldn't hold back the question. She replied coolly, "There's no difference. Both serve humanity." Maybe I really was affected by Hailey's subtle PUA tactics. For years ago, the old Rocky would have already blurted out, "Hey little bookworm, why are you being so cold to me?" But now I didn't dare to. That evening, just as I stepped out of the company after work, a stranger stopped me. He was wearing a t-shirt looking like the kind of college boy that girls wear into these days. He said, "Mr. Fong, I'm Tony. Could you please help me?" The name Tony had come up countless times in conversations with Hailey. Apparently, he was a boy the H family had sponsored through their charity work. I had never been interested though, and had never even seen a photo of him. I glanced at Serena, who had just walked out of the company behind me, then took Tony into my car. Sitting in the passenger seat, he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, clearly nervous. "Mr. Fong, I know this is abrupt, but I really have no other choice. Only you can help me." He explained that Hailey had taken his passport and insisted he stay in the country. She promised to fund his future business, but he had unfinished work abroad and didn't want her sponsorship. As an ordinary person, he didn't dare to offend the H family too much. "Mr. Fong, I did have a brief thing with Hailey back in high school, but that's long over. I have no feelings for her now, but no matter how I explain, she won't listen." I raised an eyebrow. "If I remember correctly, Mr. Tony, you indirectly ruined my wedding. In other words, why should I help him?" To my surprise, Tony looked at me with genuine confusion. Something felt off. "Wait, didn't you leak the news about your severe car accident to Hailey's people?" "Mr. Fong, I think there's been a misunderstanding. That day, I just had minor scratches. I didn't even need to be hospitalized." In that instant, fragments of overlooked details flashed through my mind. I studied Tony's nervous expression. This could be an interesting trait. I said, "I can help you, Mr. Tony, but in return, I need a favor from you as well." I saw Hailey again at a bar. I was having drinks with a few friends. This was my therapist's suggestion to try things I hadn't before. Somehow, Hailey spotted me from across the room. Drunk, she staggered over and grabbed my arm. "Rocky, what are you doing here? Didn't I tell you you're not allowed to go to bars?" She scanned me up and down, looking utterly displeased. I frowned and shook off her hand. "Hailey, if you don't want to drag your family's company down with you, you'd best stay out of my way from now on. She looked bewildered, mumbling, "Rocky, let's not break up, okay? My family's been setting me up with all these guys, but none of them treat me as well as you do. Let's get back together. I promise I'll be good to you from now on. I won't even mention Tony again." I scoffed and stepped aside, but she was relentless, trying to cling to me again. Just then, someone stepped forward, grabbed her wrist, and slapped her hard across the face. The music came to an abrupt stop. I turned around and saw Serena calmly wiping her hands with a disinfectant wipe. What a coincidence. Hailey let out a shriek, scrambled up from the floor, and lunged at Serena, clawing like a wildcat. "Who the hell do you think you are? How dare you hit me?" "Rocky, she hit me. Get rid of this BTCH for me." "Oh, and what authority do you have to order me around?" Serena smirked. "I heard your family's company has been doing well lately." Hailey bit her lip, glaring at Serena with pure hatred. I had never been one to use power to suppress others. But then again, wasn't this exactly what Hailey had done to Tony? Now I was merely returning the favor. Serena walked up to me and looked down. The dim lighting obscured her expression, but for some reason, I felt a subtle heat. She leaned in slightly and murmured, "Rocky, haven't seen you in years, and now you've become quite the player." For a second, my mind went blank. I stared at her dumbfounded, then hurriedly stammered out an explanation. No, I haven't. I broke up with her. I was rambling, panicked, and flustered just like back in the day. As I drove Serena home, I asked, "What were you doing at a bar?" "I don't mean anything by it," I quickly added. "It's just you've always been so focused on academia. It doesn't seem like your kind of place." I scolded myself internally for sounding like a clueless teenager. Serena chuckled softly. "I saw your social media post and thought I'd relax a little too." The streetlights outside flickered across her face. I looked at her and suddenly found my courage. "Can I invite you to watch the sunrise again?" Silence filled the car for a long moment. Serena didn't answer. I had overestimated myself. I slumped back into my seat, feeling reckless, then pulled out my phone and made a call. "I don't want to see Hailey running around in City A anymore. For years of suffering in exchange for a healthy future, it was worth it." I was grateful for the system's opportunity, but none of it had anything to do with Hailey. I owed her nothing. After hanging up, I turned to glance at Serena. She still wore her usual neutral expression, yet somehow I felt she was in a much better mood. When we arrived at her place, I got out first to open the car door for her. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled. Looking at me, she said, "Rocky, 3 days later, I'll be waiting." It took me a second to process what she meant. Then it hit me this was her answer. A wide grin spread across my face. As I watched her walk upstairs, I couldn't help but pump my fist in the air and cheer. The next day, by the time I received the call, Hailey was already on her way to the airport. Sometimes interests align so easily. When I arrived, her mother was anxiously comforting her. Both mother and daughter lit up when they saw me, only to frown again. Because I came empty-handed. "Aunt Alice, I'd like to speak with Hailey alone." Her mother hurriedly excused herself to the restroom. Hailey smirked. "Rocky, I knew you couldn't forget me." I couldn't help but laugh at her overconfidence. Then I tossed her a voice recorder. She looked at me in confusion. "What's this?" "Something that will completely crush you." She pressed play. Tony's voice came through. "Mr. Fong, to be honest, I really hate Hailey now. But her family helped me before, so I can't completely cut ties. I've rejected her countless times, but the more I refuse, the more she believes I truly love her, and am only staying away for her own good. It's ridiculous. I've had enough. I left the country in the first place just to escape her." Before the recording could finish, Hailey furiously hurled the recorder across the room. She snapped, "Rocky, do you think this will make me love you? You're just a pathetic simp. Even when I gave you a chance to climb up, you didn't take it. And now you want to frame Tony. Let me tell you the truth. He was the one who invited me abroad." I smiled. "Believe whatever you want. I'm only here to see you off." Hailey, being completely rejected doesn't feel great, does it? "Do you know why back when you started your business, I only gave you money, but never introduced you to my family's resources? Because I never loved you. If money could solve the problem, why would I involve my own company? Now we're finally even." With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Hailey to rage helplessly behind me. The first love she thought was hers had in reality been sick of her all along. The devoted lover she thought she had never loved her at all. One day left until my promise with Serena. I called a styling team to my place. After half a day of fussing, I was still unsatisfied. I remembered something my father once told me when I was little. The most expensive things in life are the ones that come for free, like love, like air. Since breaking my promise 4 years ago, I had never gone to the beach to watch the sunrise again. Serena said she'd be waiting at 5 a.m. I was too nervous to sleep, so I arrived early and parked outside her building. Unexpectedly, her bedroom light was still on. I picked up my phone and sent her a message. "Serena, are you asleep? But I think you forgot to turn off your light." When Serena got into the passenger seat, she, who was always so composed, looked slightly embarrassed. So I asked, "Why are you up so early?" She glanced at me, then lowered her eyes and sighed. I was afraid. A pang of guilt hit me. This was my fault. I pressed my lips together and said softly, "This time I won't let you wait. Never again." On the way to the beach, an old suspicion resurfaced in my mind. "Serena, I have a few questions. If you're willing, could you answer them? All right. The news about Tony's severe car accident, was it you who arranged for someone to leak it to Hailey? Yes. She didn't look at me, but I noticed her fingers suddenly curl slightly. Why? I just wanted to help you see whether she was worth it. And maybe I wanted to fight for myself one last time. You might think I was scheming, but Rocky, I don't regret it. Fool, how could I think that? I only feel sorry for you. If Hailey hadn't left, would you have come? No. For years ago, you didn't come, so I had no right to intrude on your life. If she had stayed, I would have simply wished you happiness. All these years have you been watching over me? You didn't pursue research and chose medicine instead. Was it because of me? It's just another way to contribute to humanity. 2 years ago, Hailey went camping in a really remote mountain, but I happened to run into a group of campers there. That was your doing, wasn't it? It was a school club activity. I chose that mountain for them. Why did you never show up? I was afraid of disturbing you. I took Serena to the best coastal spot to watch the sunrise. We sat on a rock watching as the sun slowly emerged from the horizon. Golden light scattered in fragments across the sea. I turned to look at Serena, only to find her already looking at me. A faint blush colored her face. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was the sunlight or if she was truly blushing. Her clear eyes met mine as she asked softly, "Rocky, we've watched the sunrise together now. So do you still like candy?" I smiled. "I do. I always have, and only this." Epilogue. In our first year of marriage, Serena and I returned to the beach to watch the sunrise. But this time I led her to a specific rock. "There's a secret about time hidden here," I told her. She reached out, tracing her fingers carefully across the stone. Finally, she found something near the bottom, 4 engraved characters, their depths uneven. The character S. I explained, "Every year on that day, I came here to watch the sunrise. Each time I carved another S into the rock. I used to imagine that one day you would suddenly appear before me. And now that dream has come true." Serena buried her face in my chest, sniffing quietly. I lowered my head and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Back in school, everyone thought Serena was cold and distant, unwilling to befriend others. But only I knew she simply didn't know how. I never wanted to pluck the moon from the sky. I wanted to run toward it. The end. If you like Kitten's story, please follow and like it. Updated every morning at 9 a.m.